What some of these witnesses also revealed were observations of UFOs hovering over storage sites of nuclear weapons and nuclear rocket launch sites.
The big increase in all the sightings around the world happened at the time when we began to detonate nuclear weapons. This is not an accident. And I've been told by senior intelligence officials that essentially a big red flag went up over our planet saying we were in trouble. But not only are we in trouble, but we could be a threat to others, because you combine going into space, the early stages of space travel, and the use of hydrogen bombs and nuclear weapons, and a civilization on Earth that was still very violent, as you look around the Earth even today, of course. So this is something that any enlightened or even self-interested civilization observing the Earth, which I think we've been under observation for thousands of years, would be greatly concerned.
Over the last 35 years, I have talked to now over 100 people, about 115 nuclear missile launch officers, targeting officers, missile maintenance personnel, and missile guards. And these individuals, for the most part, do not know each other. Some were in the Air Force in the 1960s, some were in the Air Force in the 1990s. And they were at different bases, but they all have very, very similar stories. And what they describe is UFOs coming in very quickly at high rates of speed and instantly stopping and hovering, either over the underground nuclear missile launchers or what are called launch control facilities that launch the missiles. So after the missiles malfunction, the UFO leaves. Now, this has occurred at least 3 Air Force bases that I'm aware of in the United States.
The event, the incident, I guess I call it, is happened on the morning of March 16th, 1967. As I recall, it was early in the morning, and I received a call from my topside security guard, and he said that he and some of the guards had been observing some strange lights flying around the site. It wasn't more than, well, within a few minutes, I'd say, maybe a half hour later. He calls back, and this time he's very frightened. I can tell by the tone of his voice, he's very shook up, and said, "Sir, there's a glowing red object hovering right outside the front gate." He said, "I'm looking at it right now. It's a glowing red object. I've got all the men out here with their weapons drawn." And of course, he was all shook up while he was telling me this. He was very excited. I immediately went over to my commander, who was taking a nap. We have a little cot down there in a rest period. And I was telling him about the telephone call we just received. Then, as I was relating this to him, our missiles started shutting down one by one. There were approximately anywhere from 6 to 8 that went down, but they went down in rapid succession, which again is an extremely rare. And in the meantime, I called upstairs to find out what the status was of this object. The guard said, "Well, the object has left. It just left at high speed."
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 en la pantalla.
Numerous well-documented UFO sightings by numerous credible people. Flying saucers tracked on radar, chased by fighter pilots. Nuclear missile sites malfunctioning after UFO visitations, and even alien beings witnessed by police officers and high-ranked military personnel. Where does all this leave us?
4 major conclusions after now 52 years, 51 years of study and investigation. First, the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. In other words, some UFOs, some, underline it 20 times, some UFOs are alien spacecraft. Most are not. I don't care about the ones that aren't. I'm a nuclear physicist. I don't care about the isotopes that aren't fissionable. Want to build a reactor? Use the one that is. Who cares about the rest? That's the first conclusion. Second, the subject of flying saucers represents a kind of cosmic Watergate. That is to say, some few people within major governments have known since at least 1947, when at least 2 crashed flying saucers were recovered with alien bodies in New Mexico, that indeed some UFOs are alien spacecraft. Notice I'm not saying everybody in government knows. That's not how you keep secrets. I worked under security for 14 years. Need to know is the important factor. The third conclusion is that none of the arguments made against the first two by a small group of noisy negativists, when I'm being polite, stand up under careful scrutiny. They sound great until you look at the data, and then all those anti-arguments collapse. And the fourth conclusion, because I'm such a shy, retiring kind of guy, is that this is the biggest story of the millennium. Visits to planet Earth by alien spacecraft. Successful cover-up of the best data, bodies and wreckage, for 62 years.
Extraterrestrial beings from somewhere are engaging us and this planet, and have been for at least since the mid-20th century, and possibly for as many thousands of years back as you care to go. That's a fact. That's an absolute certain fact. It's been proven many times over. Since the 40s, the governments of the world, and certainly the United States government, the industrialized governments, have been aware of this. Right? That's a fact. It's been proven. The United States, with the cooperation of most, if not all, of its allies from World War II, made a decision to embargo this fact and the acknowledgement of it, formal acknowledgement of it, from its citizens. That's a fact. All right. And what is happening is that 62 years after that truth embargo was formally and informally and formally instigated, that it's now coming to an end. And that we are soon going to be informed by these governments that the ET presence is real, and begin the process of learning about it from the governments, right? And from all of the citizen scientists and activists who have been pursuing it without the government support. And that information will be pushed forward and into the public domain. That's, in its simplest form, what's going on.
But why did the government instigate a truth embargo? And how could the secrecy continue till this day?
The concern in the Pentagon in the 1940s, when suddenly you have these very strange objects appearing that don't seem to be American and don't seem to be Russian, if they are spaceships, we might, if we tell the public about this and be candid with them, there could be massive panic. The first chief of Project Blue Book, Captain Edward Ruppelt, when he left the Air Force and wrote a book in 1956 about what the Pentagon knew, he stated that in the Directorate of Intelligence at the Pentagon, there was open discussion and ongoing discussion about we cannot tell the public the truth because they will not handle the truth well.
They also didn't want to alarm the people because their job is to defend the United States. And they couldn't stop these UFOs. They went with impunity anywhere they wanted to go. Okay? So the military never wants to admit that they couldn't do anything about this, because that would be to admit they were defenseless.
If we have recovered a spacecraft in 1947 at Roswell, that technology would be so superior to human technology that the Pentagon certainly would keep that a secret, even from America's allies in Europe, to try to create our own UFOs. So if a war with the Russians, the Soviets happened, we would have the advantage because of this superior technology. That would be one reason for the secrecy.
It rapidly became, I think, the case that the truth embargo was completely now subservient from the standpoint of the managers of this issue to the Cold War. Until the Cold War was over, there was going to be no public discussions about extraterrestrials, right? And it's hard to argue with that reasoning, all right? But they had a formidable problem, because while it's easy to decide, okay, we're not going to talk about this, we're not going to reveal this, ETs are all over the place. They're being seen, filmed, photographed, seen by pilots outside of cockpits, year after year after year. At the same time, they're trying to maintain a policy that there's nothing there to investigate. So they had a really tough job. It's easy to say we're going to build a super bomber and put everybody under oath and classify the whole program and maybe even stick it underground and build your secret bomber. That's easy, right? But this was not easy. The extraterrestrials can come and go as they pleased. They could come and contact people as they pleased, abduct them, apparently, if they wish to. And the government has to somehow maintain this false reality in the face of all that. So the truth embargo was not just a simple decision and extremely difficult to implement. The amazing thing is that they did. They put an enormous amount of money, time, and effort into this truth embargo and succeeded.
This embargo of UFO information, of course, stretches far beyond the United States and is particularly prevalent in NATO countries, which are, after all, a military system, and therefore they each take orders from the person above them and generally has been run from the United States. And apparently, according to official documents we have and according to personal narratives, they are discouraged from talking about UFOs or from looking into it.
From the 70s, Hollywood engaged profoundly in the ET issue, knowing that there was a growing interest in the general public for these topics. The popular movies also had the effect of making people more familiar with the thought of a widely inhabited universe beyond our own planet system. In the 90s, people started recording their observations with the new handy camcorders. Today, thousands of UFO clips are posted on YouTube. But unfortunately, with the sophisticated animation tools now available on home PCs, it's almost impossible to tell the real from the fake. So this has made both video and digital stills documentation less reliable as evidence or proof of sightings. But in spite of this growing interest in the subject, the main news media have left the UFO phenomenon almost untouched.
In terms of mainstream news coverage, this topic is not taken seriously. It's basically a non-topic. So how is that so? Here's how. It requires an understanding of the relationship between most of the mainstream news media and global intelligence communities. So what that says, that doesn't mean that the CIA controlled everything, but that you have to understand the media acts in certain choke points. So, for example, a UFO sighting might get local news coverage, but that doesn't mean that it gets covered on the wire services. That's a very different situation altogether. And skeptics will argue, well, this phenomenon is so big it would have been covered, but really what that betrays is a lack of understanding of how news media has been related to intelligence communities around the world for decades.
And I call upon our government to open up like other governments have, and you will hear about that this morning. Like the
when CNN covered a press conference in Washington, D.C. in 2009, where Dr. Edgar Mitchell encouraged U.S. government to release its UFO files, the hope was that the issue finally was given serious news coverage.
Former Apollo astronaut Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon, told the National Press Club he's convinced.
But there isn't convincing proof that's going to convince the entire world at this point.
That is correct. That is what we're trying to open up.
We're about to go out and do our little hoax.
But CNN chose to let two boys with air balloons have just as much time in the report, demonstrating how they managed to fool UFO believers.
Again, we're not trying to prove or disprove anything.